I had always believed my marriage was the kind of love people spent their whole lives searching for. After years together, my husband and I had built a life filled with ordinary moments that felt extraordinary to me. We had shared quiet dinners, family celebrations, difficult conversations, and countless nights where we sat together talking about everything and nothing. My husband was not just my partner. He was the person I trusted most in this world. When something exciting happened, he was the first person I wanted to tell. When life became overwhelming, he was the person I leaned on. I believed we were a team, two people who had chosen each other every single day. Our routine was simple, but I loved it. Mornings started with coffee, quick conversations before work, and reminders about small things we needed to do. Evenings were usually spent catching up about our days, sharing stories, and enjoying the comfort of being home together. Those little habits made me feel secure. I never woke up wondering if my husband was hiding something from me. Betrayal was never part of the picture I had created in my mind. I thought the foundation we built over the years was too strong to be shaken by anything. That is why I decided to surprise him at his office that day. He had recently accomplished something important at work, and I wanted him to know how proud I was of him. I prepared his favorite lunch, packed everything carefully, and drove to his workplace with a smile on my face. I remember feeling excited, imagining the look of surprise when he saw me standing there. The building looked exactly like any normal office building. People walked in and out carrying coffee cups, talking on their phones, and rushing between meetings. I walked through the entrance holding the lunch bag, completely unaware that my entire understanding of my marriage was about to change. I approached the reception desk and politely told the receptionist, "Hi, I'm here to see my husband." She looked up and smiled at first. "Of course. What's his name?" I gave her his name confidently and added, "I'm his wife." The expression on her face changed almost immediately. It was subtle, but I noticed it. Her smile faded slightly, and she looked uncertain, like she was trying to understand something that did not make sense. Then she asked a question that made my heart suddenly feel heavy. "Wait, his wife?" I nodded, confused. She hesitated before saying, "A woman came in this morning and said she was his wife too." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. The noise of the office around me seemed to fade. The conversations, footsteps, and ringing phones became distant sounds. I stood there holding the lunch I had made for my husband, trying to process a sentence I never expected to hear. Another woman had claimed to be his wife. I could have reacted immediately. I could have demanded answers, called my husband, or created a scene right there in the lobby. But something inside me stopped me. I needed to know the truth before I made any accusations. Because deep down, there were small things I had noticed lately. Things I had ignored. My husband had started keeping his phone closer than usual. He would turn it face down on the table or step into another room when certain messages came in. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. Everyone deserves privacy, and I did not want to become someone who searched for problems. Then there were the changes in his schedule. He began staying late at work more often. Meetings appeared unexpectedly. Plans changed at the last minute. Sometimes he seemed distracted when I talked, like his mind was somewhere else. I noticed those moments, but I always found a reason to explain them away. Work stress. Pressure. Exhaustion. Those were the explanations I gave myself because the alternative was too painful to consider. Standing at that reception desk, I felt my trust fighting against my instincts. Part of me wanted to believe there was a simple explanation. After all, this was the man I had loved, supported, and trusted for years. But another part of me knew that something was wrong. I thanked the receptionist and stepped away calmly. I did not tell her what I was thinking. I did not reveal the storm of emotions building inside me. Instead, I decided to wait. I found a quiet place nearby where I could observe what happened next. I wanted facts, not assumptions. I wanted the truth, not a fight based on fear. As I sat there, I looked back at every memory I had shared with my husband. The happy moments, the promises, the sacrifices, and all the times I believed we were stronger than anything life could throw at us. But now, I was beginning to understand something. The surprise I had planned for my husband was not the only surprise waiting that day. I stayed quiet, watching carefully, knowing that whatever I discovered next would force me to see my marriage differently. And sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones we find when we are simply looking for a reason to celebrate. Stayed in my car for almost an hour, watching people come and go through the office entrance. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the receptionist misunderstood something. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe the woman who came earlier had a different connection to my husband. But the longer I waited, the harder it became to believe that. I noticed how comfortable everyone seemed around my husband's office. Employees walked in and out like they knew exactly what was happening inside those walls. I watched his coworkers greet each other, share conversations, and move through their normal routines while I sat there feeling like I had suddenly become a stranger in my own husband's world. Then I saw something that made my stomach tighten. A woman walked out of the building. At first, I didn't recognize her. She carried herself confidently, like she belonged there. She stopped near the entrance, looked at her phone, and smiled at something she saw on the screen. A few moments later, my husband's office assistant walked by and greeted her warmly. That small interaction bothered me. It was not the way people acted toward a random visitor. It looked familiar. Comfortable. Like this woman had been part of their environment for a while. I tried to remember every conversation I had with my husband about his work. He always told me his office was stressful, busy, and full of deadlines. He rarely mentioned specific names anymore. He stopped telling me stories about his coworkers like he used to. I had noticed that change, but I never questioned it deeply. Now I wondered why. Over the next few days, I quietly paid attention to everything. I did not accuse my husband. I did not ask questions that would make him suspicious. I simply watched and listened. I started noticing patterns. The late meetings he mentioned did not always match the schedule he gave me. The names of people he claimed to be working with did not appear in conversations with his coworkers. Some events he said were cancelled had actually happened without him telling me. Little details began forming a picture I did not want to see. I checked old messages between us, not because I wanted to invade his privacy, but because I needed to understand when things started changing. I noticed how his replies had become shorter. How his explanations became more general. How he stopped sharing parts of his day that he once freely talked about. It felt like pieces of my own life had been removed without my permission. The hardest part was not just the possibility that my husband had lied. The hardest part was realizing that the person I trusted most might have been carefully controlling what I knew. I felt embarrassed. I wondered how many people noticed something was wrong before I did. I wondered if I had ignored obvious signs because I loved him too much to question him. But I also knew myself. I was not going to make a decision based only on pain and anger. I needed the full truth. So I kept looking. I discovered that the woman from the office had not been a one-time visitor. She had appeared in places connected to my husband's work before. There were meetings he never mentioned and conversations that suddenly made sense when I looked at them differently. Then I found something that changed everything. There were financial decisions being made that I knew nothing about. Nothing illegal. Nothing obvious enough to immediately expose him. But there were choices involving money, plans, and commitments that should have been discussed between a husband and wife. Instead, they were happening quietly. Behind my back. I remember sitting alone one evening, staring at documents on my table, feeling like I was looking at a stranger's life. The home we built, the future we planned, and the security I thought we had all suddenly felt uncertain. I started wondering how much of my marriage was real. Had my husband simply made mistakes and hidden them because he was afraid? Or had he created an entirely different life while allowing me to believe everything was normal? That question haunted me. But something inside me changed during that time. I stopped thinking about reacting. I started thinking about protecting myself. I was no longer the woman standing at the office reception desk holding a surprise lunch. I was someone searching for the truth and refusing to let emotions destroy my ability to think clearly. I decided that if my husband had betrayed me, the truth would come out on my terms. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not give him the chance to rewrite the story before I understood it completely. Then I discovered one more detail about the woman who had walked into his office that morning. She was connected to something much deeper than I first imagined. And when I learned who she really was, I realized the situation was not as simple as a secret relationship. There was another reason behind my husband's actions. A reason I never saw coming. I gathered everything I had found, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for the conversation that could change my entire life. Because soon, I was going to find out whether my husband had betrayed me completely, or whether the truth hiding behind that office door was something far more complicated. For days, I carried the weight of everything I had discovered. I had prepared myself for the worst, convinced that the woman at my husband's office was part of a betrayal I could barely understand. But when I finally learned the complete truth, I realized I had only been seeing one piece of a much bigger story. The woman was not my husband's secret partner. She was someone from his past. Someone connected to a decision he had been hiding from me for months. Her name was Claire, and she was a former business partner who had once helped my husband build his career. Years earlier, they had worked together on a project that failed, leaving behind financial problems and unresolved issues. When she returned with an opportunity to fix those mistakes, my husband made a choice. A choice he should have discussed with me. Instead, he kept it hidden. He thought he was protecting me from stress. He convinced himself that handling everything alone was the right thing to do. But what he failed to understand was that hiding the truth created a much deeper wound than the problem itself. When I finally confronted him, I did not scream. I did not throw accusations without facts. I placed everything I had discovered on the table and calmly asked one question. Why did you decide I was someone you needed to hide things from? That question broke something in him. For the first time, I saw the guilt on his face. Not the guilt of someone caught in an affair, but the guilt of someone who realized he had damaged the trust of the person who believed in him the most. He admitted everything. The late nights were sometimes real, but he had also used work as an excuse to avoid difficult conversations. The phone secrecy was not because he was hiding another woman, but because he was hiding financial struggles and conversations he was ashamed to have. His intentions were not what I feared. But the damage was still real. Because betrayal is not only about what someone does. Sometimes betrayal is about what someone chooses not to tell you. I had spent years building a partnership with my husband, believing we faced problems together. Finding out he had been carrying a separate life of worries and decisions without me hurt deeply. I had to decide what happened next. Part of me wanted to make him feel the same pain I felt. I wanted him to understand what it was like to stand in that office lobby and question everything. But I realized something important. Destroying his reputation would not heal my heart. Creating chaos would not rebuild my confidence. The strongest thing I could do was take control of my own choices. So I made boundaries clear. I told him that honesty was no longer optional. If we were going to continue our marriage, communication had to become the foundation again. No more hidden decisions. No more protecting each other through silence. This was my quiet revenge. Not revenge against him, but against the version of myself who ignored her own instincts. I stopped doubting my feelings. I stopped convincing myself that uncomfortable moments did not matter. I learned that trusting someone does not mean ignoring the signs when something feels wrong. It means having the courage to ask questions. Over time, we worked through the damage. It was not instant, and it was not perfect. Trust does not return because someone says sorry once. It returns through consistent actions, honesty, and patience. My husband had consequences for his choices. He had to rebuild the trust he had weakened. He had to understand that love cannot survive without openness. And I had my own journey too. I became more independent. I became more confident. I learned that my worth was not defined by whether someone else chose to be honest with me. That experience changed the way I viewed relationships. I learned that the truth does not always arrive the way we expect. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it forces us to question everything. But in the end, knowing the truth gives us the power to choose what comes next. The biggest lesson I took from that day was simple. Patience and dignity can be stronger than anger. The moment I chose to seek the truth instead of creating a scene was the moment I protected myself. I gave myself the chance to understand the situation fully and make decisions based on reality. If there is one thing I hope you take from my story, it is this: never ignore your instincts, but also never let fear control your actions. Ask questions. Seek honesty. Protect your peace. Because sometimes the greatest victory is not proving someone wrong. It is finding yourself again. I would love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were standing in that office lobby and heard those words? Share your opinion in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about trust, betrayal, and the unexpected turns life can take, make sure to subscribe for more real lifestyle stories that remind us of the power of truth.